Hello, everybody. This is Wrestling Discussion here. So, SmackDown. What an interesting segment with Cody Rhodes and Drew McIntyre. Cody Rhodes came out, promoted 3 hours of SmackDown on USA, promoted Raw on Netflix, talked about his ladder match with Kevin Owens, did everything that he needed to do, sold everything he needed to sell. And then out comes Drew McIntyre, walking slowly. And he has impressive pyro. I love his pyro. He comes out, gets into the ring, and he looks at Cody Rhodes, and he says, "I don't want to hurt you." And then Cody Rhodes starts talking about getting fired up, talking about throwing hands, talking about the tension in the room, wanting to go at it, offering Drew a title match, doing all the fired up babyface stuff. And Drew says some interesting things, that this is the best in-ring generation we've ever had. This is better than the golden era, the new generation, the attitude era. He says that Cody Rhodes is the quarterback of it all, but he's about to mess it up. And he says that he's here to help Cody. And he gives Cody a hug. And it's very sort of this awkward sort of moment, right? And then Drew McIntyre starts to walk off, and he says, sort of warns Cody that he needs to watch his back. And then here comes Kevin Owens with the blindside attack to the backside. Him and Cody go at it. Security officials come out to separate things. And that basically ends the segment. Now, I think this is really something interesting by WWE. They're definitely foreshadowing. And it used to be when you had a program, you would just have the program, you'd end the program or the feud or the rivalry, and then you'd start with the next one, right? They'd all be separate. Now, it's a lot more foreshadowing. It's a lot more, you're having a segment now for something to set up something that's going to happen 6, 8, 9 months from now, right? It's a lot more foreshadowing. It's a lot more sort of long-term storytelling. For example, with the Bloodline, Solo Sikoa, back when the feud was happening with the Bloodline Civil War the first time around with Roman and Solo versus the Usos, Solo was holding the Ulafala back then, foreshadowing what would happen in the future. They're doing something similar with this segment. I think what this is doing is you're eventually going to have something down the road where I think it's Drew McIntyre, Kevin Owens, maybe Seth Rollins, who knows, versus the OG Bloodline, Roman, Jay, Jimmy, and Sammy. And they're foreshadowing, what will Cody do when this time comes. I think that's what they're doing. But I actually absolutely love Drew McIntyre right now. He is the MVP of WWE. He's talked about, when he went away after the Hell in a Cell match and he had a personal tragedy and only one person called to check on him. I heard something interesting about a theory out there that one person could be The Rock. And Drew McIntyre is now acting as The Rock's personal mercenary. And boy, that would be some interesting storytelling, right? That would be deep. Because if you remember, when Drew McIntyre re-signed with WWE this past year, it was The Rock that announced it. I believe he announced it on his Instagram. So to take something that happened on social media like that, and then sort of convert it into an on-screen, on-air story, it's really good thinking. That's really Hollywood. That's really good Hollywood movie thinking. I mean, I kind of used to hate the idea of Hollywood writers in wrestling, but now it's sort of, when I do things like this, if it turns out to be true. But the segment was really interesting, right? Because it's episodic. You're in one season and you're setting up for what the next season's going to be. With Easter eggs, foreshadowing, little things like that make the story better, makes the product better. Because you did what the segment was meant to do. You promoted Kevin Owens versus Cody Rhodes at Rumble. You promoted 3 hours on SmackDown. You promoted Raw on Netflix. But you also set up tidbits for the next story. And we're still not entirely sure what's going to happen next with Drew. Obviously, he's got Jey Uso on Raw, on Netflix, but what happens next, right? Does he face Jimmy one-on-one? Makes that tribal combat match seem much more interesting, doesn't it? But this was a brilliant segment overall, because it set things into play that, it could set up a future Drew McIntyre-Cody match post-WrestleMania. That's certainly in the cards. You have to look at that as a possibility, too. That might be the first possibility coming out of this. We just don't know. And when you don't know, it makes the product better because you can't predict it. And that's what wrestling was missing for a long time, a lack of predictability. But that's all for this one, guys. Thanks.